there, my name's Caitlin Bandy and this is my channel Bandy's Books. So you're probably wondering where the hell I've been for the last couple weeks. I had planned to do a whole series of videos for Christmas and I was not feeling well. I ended up having to take a couple days for myself. I've been working 6 days a week since May, and I think my body just hit kind of a point where I was just exhausted. But it was kind of a good thing because it gave me some time to really think about this channel and think about the things that I'm doing with my Booktube and make some tweaks for what I plan to do for the upcoming year. I am going to be cutting back on content a little bit. I think the last month I tried a bunch of different things to kind of see what worked and what didn't work, and I think I have a clear idea going forward. So you may see some changes starting January of what my channel is, in terms of content. I'm still going to be doing bookish recipes. I'm still going to be doing like long form videos like book hauls and like TBRs, end of the month wrap ups. I'm still going to be doing book tags, and I'm going to be rotating in like book blogs. So instead of like the weekly blogs that I was trying out, I'm going to do just a specific reading vlog of like one individual book. And I think I'm going to just publish like less per week so that I can focus on better quality content and not burn myself out. I think I was just trying to do too much and I like overexhausted myself 6 days a week, plus trying to shoot videos every single night, plus keeping up with Instagram and Goodreads and all that just was a bit much. So anyways, I'm back and I just wanted to give you a wrap up of my reading for 2021. I started my social media in October, both Bookstagram and Booktube, and I didn't really keep too much track of the books that I read prior to that. I didn't go back and like add anything to Goodreads except for maybe a couple of the 5-star reads that really stood out. I just focused on documenting from October to December. So these statistics are mostly focused on that time period. There are a few books that really stood out that I added in from earlier in the year, but for the vast majority of this focuses on October through December. These are going to be broken down into 1 stars through 5 stars. I'm going to just briefly go over everything because it's a lot of books and I don't want to keep you here, all night, especially on New Year's Eve. I know you've got other things. And then stay tuned at the end of this because I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of my goals going forward in 2022, some exciting things I have coming up. And I'm going to announce the winners of the 2 giveaways that I did in my 12 Days at Christmas videos. I haven't forgotten about those, so I want to make sure that I let those people know that they won so they can get in touch with me and I can arrange for their prizes to be shipped. So to start, I'm just going to briefly go over my rating criteria. 1-star read for me is a DNF. I will not DNF a book without 3 tries. I will read a book up to like 50 pages. If I'm not vibing with it, I'll set it aside, try it again later. If I'm still not vibing with it, set it aside and try it a 3rd time. After the 3rd time, if it's still not working for me, then I'll go ahead and DNF it, and that's the only occasion in which I'll give a book a 1 star. For 2 stars, it's going to be a book that I managed to get all the way through, but it had major problems for me. 3 stars, so book, something that, I didn't feel like was a huge waste of time, but not necessarily something that I would like highly recommend. 4 stars, going to be a really solid read, a book that I might keep a copy of because I liked it enough. Definitely something I would recommend, but maybe like little things that I might tweak here and there. And a 5-star read for me means perfection. There's nothing I would change about it. I love it as it is. I'm super happy about it. It's a book that I'm going to rant and rave about. I'm going to be recommending all over social media. So we're going to start with the 1 stars because that's the easiest list here. I only had one 1-star book this year, and that was No One Is Talking About This by Patricia Lockwood. I don't know what it was with this book, but I just could not connect. It was supposed to be kind of a scathing critique of social media and this woman's involvement with social media versus real life and kind of this detachment she's feeling. I think the whole beginning of the book, I couldn't relate with it because it was like reading memes but with no picture for context. It was very like you're reading lots of chat text, and I don't particularly love that. I just couldn't get into it. I tried it 3 times throughout the year and it just wasn't my thing. So that was the only 1-star book of the year for me. 2-star reads. I had 5 2-star reads, and that's, I feel like, pretty good. Most of my reads were like in the 3-star to 4-star range. So the 2-star range books were Nothing But Black and Teeth. That's a novella. I listened to it on audiobook a little while ago, And the concept's really interesting. It's about a group of friends that go to this haunted house for a wedding, and it's set in Japan, and I felt like there was like all sorts of potentially cool cultural information that could have been included, but it was really rushed. There wasn't a lot of character development. It was kind of confusing, and it just lacked any depth for me. So just not quite all the way there. Survive the Night was the next one by Riley Sager. I found it just too inconceivable. I get that, books require you to suspend disbelief sometimes, but when a book is grounded in reality, if it's grounded in reality and then suddenly asks you to suspend all the rules of reality, I think for me, it doesn't work. I did think that the quality of the writing was good. It just was like too convoluted of a plot. So I will give them a try in other books. And then The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Mark Ronson was like dude bro literature, too much bravado about his sexual conquests, too much like braggadocious behavior. The whole writing style turned me off. There might have been good concepts in there, but I was so distracted by the dude bro attitude. And then Mind Over Magic was a book that I received through Goodreads. It's by Lindsay Buroker, and it was a fantasy book, the start of a series. There's werewolves and witches, and the main character, after inheriting her grandmother's property, finds out that she has witch's blood, and there's a very possessive werewolf involved. Again, concepts that I like, but the execution was a little off for me. It was very rushed. The plot was not fleshed out enough. The characters needed more work. Just a lot of small issues that added up to something that didn't quite work. I have heard that some of her other series are really good, and I do have actually one trilogy that she wrote that I also won from Goodreads, and I hear that one's really good. So I'm going to be checking that one out in the new year, and hopefully I'll have better luck with it. And finally, I Am Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter. This was probably my most disappointing 2-star. I wanted to love this book so bad, and I just felt like all the characters were unlikable. I felt like it relied on really ugly stereotypes instead of I wanted a realistic portrayal, I guess, and it felt like every single character in the book was a really ugly stereotype. And the character's so unlikable. Not just the main character, but all the supporting characters are really unlikable as well. And it just felt like a trudge trying to get through it. It wasn't an enjoyable book for me. So I had to give it a 2 stars. So now we're getting into the bigger categories. 3 stars. I had 15 books that I rated in the 3-star category. Again, a 3-star is so-so. I liked the book, but it wasn't amazing. There's definitely things I would change. So the first of those was Velvet Was the Night by Silvia Moreno Garcia. I recently read this one. I've been on a streak of reading through Silvia Moreno Garcia's whole backlog, and I've been loving her writing. Everything I've read by her so far was a 4-star, so it was a little sad to have to give this one a 3-star. It was still good, but I felt like the plot was a little kind of stretched out too much. I think if it was just a little shorter and few of the extraneous details had been cut out, it would have been a better book. It is really interesting in that it focuses on some actual history in Mexico. It is a historical fiction, and it was some history that I wasn't that familiar with, so I did learn from it, and I thought overall the concept was good. It is a noir historical kind of a thing, so my only noir on my whole list here that we're talking about. I also read Of Women and Salt, and that was a 3-star for me. It was good. It was really interesting. So it's about Cuba and multiple generations, one generation born in Cuba, one generation born in Florida, and kind of the differences between the generations. And then some Salvadoran immigrants get involved in the story. I did think that there was a lot of good pieces to the story. I liked each individual story. It just, to me, didn't feel like all 3 of them fit together really well. I felt like the way that they were linked together was kind of slapdash instead of really well thought out. I did really like all of the details they included about the Cuban Revolution and everything. My partner comes from Cuba, so it was interesting comparing notes with the book and him, if this was accurate. It seems like it was pretty accurate, so that is good. I also read The Wolf Den, which was an ARC from NetGalley, and I gave that a 3-star just because I felt like it was written about a historical piece. It's supposed to be about brothels in Pompeii, but the characters are very modern sounding. The way that they discuss things, it sounds like, teenagers in Los Angeles, which kind of kept pulling me out of the story. I thought the overall concept was good, and I did like that they covered a class of women that are often forgot. Next up was You Are a Badass by Jen Sincero. This was a motivational sort of a book. I did think that the concept of the book was good, and I thought that the writing was good. I actually listened to it on audiobook, and the author herself does the audio for it, and I thought she was very sincere and delivered really, really well. My main problem with this one was just that I felt like there wasn't enough actual content for the size of the book. I think everything could have been summed up in a long essay, and it didn't really need, more than 5 pages to summarize the whole story. Cold Morning, I read back in December. It was a detective novel. I liked that it featured Indigenous characters, that it's set in Canada. I just felt like there was some explicit graphic violence, particularly towards minors, that was unnecessary. This is a series, so it may become more necessary as the series progresses in terms of character development, but it was the first scene in the book, and for me, it just kind of put me in a funk with it. I don't know, I don't need graphic portrayal of child rape in my books, so that was that. Sorrowland by River Solomon. I read that at Halloween time. Another book that I love the concept of, I thought that it was really interesting. The first half of the book was edge of the seat, exciting, and then it dragged for the middle portion of the book, and then the ending was really rushed. So I think just some execution issues on that. Overall, a pretty good book. The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. This was a disappointing one for me because everybody raves about it, but for me, I felt like it really oversimplified depression. I felt like it made it seem like, oh yeah, if you just change your perspective, on how your life is going, then depression is just magically cured. And unfortunately, it's not that simple. People that suffer from depression deal with chemical imbalances, really severe life issues. It's not so much just, oh, change your perspective on how things turned out and everything, is magically cured. Let's see. The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, probably my biggest disappointment out of the 3 stars. Everybody hyped this book. I've heard that it's life-changing, it's everywhere, and it was just really dull for me. I think it was about 200 pages too long. I did think the plot was an interesting idea. Addie was an interesting character. I just wish that there had been 200 pages trimmed out of the book, and then it would have been excellent. The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. This was good writing. I found it suspenseful and interesting, but overall, I guess just because I figured out the twists, probably 2/3 of the way in, it kind of was a little disappointing since I had been hearing how masterful his twists were. Same thing with The Maidens. Again, he sets beautiful scenery. This had that dark academia vibe. It was wonderful how he talked about the college and described everything, but I feel like he's a little heavy-handed with his red herrings and his misdirects, which is what ends up giving away the twists for me, because I don't know, my mind just works that way. As I'm reading, he keeps pushing a certain character or a certain direction, and I pick up on it. And so in both cases, I figured out the twists before I got to the end of the book. The Lost Apothecary, I believe by Sarah Penner. I liked one plotline a lot better than the other. In this case, there is a present tense plotline and then a past plotline. The past plotline was super, super interesting. The present relied on a lot of cliches, and I didn't love it. Probably the most beautiful cover of any of the books on this list, though. The Monster of Ellenhaven. This was a novella. It's a graphic novel, definitely horror and very bloody horror. I think that the writing was fantastic. I think if you're really into super bloody, visceral horror, then this would be a great book. But for me, it just wasn't my personal preference. This is the only book in this case where I don't think that the author was at fault. I think it's a personal preference issue. So if you like really bloody, violent horror, then I think this would be something I feel confident recommending. The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. Oh, I loved the Hunger Games series, and when this book came out, I was so excited to read it. And then I read it, and I felt kind of bored with it. I expected so much more from Coriolanus Snow. I expected him to be much deeper, much darker, and much more sadistic. And I guess we get to see that he's brutal and he doesn't really care about anyone and how he became that way. But I don't know, I just wasn't digging it nearly as much as I liked the original Hunger Games series. And The Other Black Girl by Zakiya Harris. This book was actually really interesting. I loved the concept of it. I thought that the messaging was really, really interesting. I just felt that it did kind of a weird switch. So like the first half of the book, it seemed to be like kind of a personal drama between two people, and then all of a sudden it turned into this like weird horror, and I guess that consistency threw me off. I think if the original concept or the plot concept had been done in one theme or the other, like the whole way through, I think it would have been excellent. I think it's just that it kind of switches directions mid-book. And Shatter Me. I picked that book up because I've been seeing it a lot. I needed something easy to read on the plane to San Diego for Christmas, and so I had that. And it's an okay book. I think it's interesting. The concept is kind of cool. You know, it's dystopian. You can tell though very much that it is young adult fiction. And I don't actually have anything against young adult. I do read young adult. I like big fantasy series and things like that. But in this case, I think this is written for an audience a little younger than I would typically read. Although there is a lot of violence and suggestiveness in it, so maybe I'm wrong. It just, I don't know. I'm, only one book into the series, so perhaps it's going to change and grow as the series goes. I'm going to read book 2 and see how that goes before I decide on the rest of the series. But the first one for me was just a 3-star. Next up is the 4-star category, which is the largest category of them all. I have 29 4-star books. Gonna go over them really, really quickly because 29 of them. So first up is Katawitch, which is by Nnedi Okorafor. It's in the Nicity Scripts series, and it is featuring a albino Nigerian American, and she moves with her family back to Nigeria and finds out that she has magical powers. She's part of a specific group of people called the Leopard People, and it's kind of a coming of age story. Kind of reminds me in some ways of Harry Potter because, it's got that same vibe. She's, in essence, like a muggle, and she doesn't know that she has any magical powers, and then she hits a certain point in her life and her magical powers start to show. She gets introduced into this whole world she had no idea existed. It's a lot of fun. I love all of the cultural stuff that's in it. I cannot wait to read the next book in the series. I'm definitely going to be reading the whole thing, and highly recommend if you like a fantasy sort of a series. Next up is The Guest List by Lucy Foley. This is a suspense thriller. I thought this was very interesting. It follows a wedding that's occurring on an island, and there's some dark stuff going on. All the different guests have different pasts and secrets, and all those secrets kind of collide into one big shit show, basically. It was really interesting. I thought that it was really well written. The suspense was good. I did figure out some of the twists, but not all of them. The final twist was one that actually did catch me off guard, so I thought that was a pretty good book. The Personal Librarian I recently read. I thought this was super, super interesting. It is historical fiction. It's about the librarian for a very wealthy family and this art collection and book collection that she's building. It's fascinating, really interesting. It deals with race, perception of race, social identity, all sorts of different stuff. Notes on a Nervous Planet by Matt Haig. This was an interesting book. It's mostly about anxiety and dealing with our anxious thoughts. I thought this was a valuable book, probably one of the more valuable self-help books that I read in the year, actually. I liked it a lot better than I liked The Midnight Library. I thought it was a little bit more compassionate in its dealing with the topic. I think perhaps because he deals with anxiety himself, he had a better way of expressing it. Auschwitz Lullaby. This is about a German woman who is married to a gypsy man. They have several children, and when the SS and the Nazis and everything are rounding up, the Jewish people, they also are rounding up the gypsy population, and her husband and children are arrested and sent to Auschwitz, and she's actually offered to go ahead and stay. They tell her she can, relinquish her family to them, and she can just go on about her business because she's, a German woman. And she's like, what the hell is wrong with you guys? If my family is going, I'm going with them. And so she chooses to go to Auschwitz with her husband and her children. And because she's a nurse, she ends up working in the hospital there. And then when Dr. Mengele comes to Auschwitz, she ends up forming a tentative relationship with him, if it can even be called that. Basically, she realizes that she has some sway over him because she's a German woman, and so she convinces him to open up a nursery for the children in the camp, and she ends up saving many, many people. She ends up doing a lot of good work. It's a really, really interesting story about a part of Auschwitz that I didn't really know a lot about, and I've read a lot about Auschwitz. Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. I had hoped this was going to be a 5-star review because everybody seems to love it. It says Taylor Jenkins Reid. This was my very first book by them, and I did really like it. I thought it was beautifully written. I thought the plot was super interesting. Characters were compelling. I felt like maybe the ending was slightly more dramatic than it needed to be. Overall, I liked it. I would definitely read another of their books. All the Murmuring Bones. This was a fun one for me. This was based on Irish mythology. It had mer people, it had selkies, ghosts, all sorts of interesting mythology, and basically a girl trying to outrun a family curse and finding out what happened to her parents and things. The Sentence by Louise Erdrich. This was my very first book by Louise Erdrich. It was a really interesting experience. I actually did a recipe based on this book. You can look up here and a link will pop up. It's a corn soup that shows up in the book. This book follows a character named Tuki who was in jail. She comes out, she starts working at a bookstore, she's being haunted, a whole bunch of different stuff. The pandemic comes into play. It's a really, really unique book. The Great Alone by Kristen Hanna. Probably my most depressing read of the year. Super well written, but dark, dark, dark. If you haven't read this and you're going to read it, all sorts of trigger warnings, violence, abuse, both like spousal abuse, child abuse, traumatic injuries, just, I mean, you name it, teenage pregnancy. It's just a mess of violence and darkness, but it's so well written, very moving. I don't know if I can call it a good read. It's a well-written book. Next up was Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. This was such a cool book. I love the main character, Kaya. She's so resourceful, so independent, so unique. I thought that it was just so well written. I could imagine the scenery, the smells, the sounds of the marsh that she lives in. And, you know, it's funny because I'm not really into romance, but the love story between her and her partner was so beautiful. I thought it was really well written, and it was true to what like romance in real life is, not this like fake fluffy version that you read and see in movies. Next up, The Bookwoman of Troublesome Creek. This was a really good read for me, almost a 5-star, like this close from being a 5-star. It was about the blue-skinned people of Kentucky and the pack horse librarians, both of which are real things. I had no idea that those were real things. Well, I knew a bit about the pack horse librarians, but nothing about the blue-skinned people of Kentucky. It was fascinating. I so enjoyed this book, and Cussy Mary is one badass main character. Atomic Habits. I thought this was also a super useful self-help book. It's all about the formation of habits. It includes a lot of scientific research and papers, and it's not just somebody sitting there talking about, oh, I know this because And then Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This was a super popular book this year. I picked it up at Halloween time because of the beautiful cover. It sounded super interesting. It was super interesting. This had some very creepy, gross Gothic vibes. It's a little slow, but it really gives time for like the impact of the different horror elements. I think it was a pretty cool read. Gods of Jade and Shadow, also by Silvia Moreno Garcia. This is kind of a fantasy epic adventure. It follows a girl who meets one of the Mayan gods of death, and they go on an adventure together. It's set in different parts of Mexico. I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. The Henna Artist by Alka Joshi, also an excellent read. It is set in Jaipur, India. It follows a character Lakshmi, who is moved herself from one station in life to become the most successful henna artist in Jaipur. She's doing all the henna and like herbal remedies and stuff for all the socialites of the city, and it's kind of about her life and what's going on in it, and it was so good. Really, really recommend it. Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Bully. This was another excellent book. Super, super good indigenous representation. Talks about the Ojibwe tribe and the Anishinaabe culture and everything. Has a lot of cultural information in there. Covers language, traditions, all sorts of different stuff. Social issues within the tribe. It was really fascinating. Characters were super complex and interesting. It is young adult fiction, but it does not read like young adult fiction. It definitely I think would be very satisfying for adult readers. So don't be turned off by the young adult label on it. The Four Winds, also by Kristen Hanna. This was another super depressing book. I don't know, I've said this a couple times, but I don't know if Kristen Hanna, all her books are super depressing, but the two that I've read so far are super depressing. Four Winds is about a character named Elsa. It's in Texas during the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression, and it's about her struggles raising her family and all the things she goes through. It's one of those books I kept hoping would be less depressing with time and kept getting more depressing with time, but excellently written and one of the prettiest covers on my list as well. Quiet Girl by S.F. Kosa. This was a thriller. I read it at Halloween time. It is about a missing wife. This guy is trying to figure out what happened to her, and it leads him into this whole complex story of what happened to her when she was younger. It's a really fascinating book. I enjoyed it. I did find some of the twists a little bit predictable, but not all of them. I think that's usually like the trick with thrillers. If I rate them a little higher, it's usually because I didn't figure out the twists all the way. Next up is Billy Summers by Stephen King. I really enjoyed this. I haven't read a whole lot of Stephen King, and this was definitely different than the Stephen King I read in the past. This was more of like an action-adventure sort of a book. Features a guy who's an assassin for the mob, and he's doing his famous one last job, and it all goes to shit, as you would expect. Super interesting. I also did a recipe based on this book. It was a cranberry orange muffins. Link will be up here somewhere if you're interested in checking that out at some point. And The Push by Ashley Audrain, one of my favorite thrillers of the year. This is about a mother who is pregnant and eventually gives birth to her child, and she just has, from the start, this very big disconnect with her child. And at first it seems like it might be postpartum depression, but as the story progresses, you start to think it might be something more. Super interesting. I'm not really into like children at all, so whenever there's a story about like motherhood or having kids, I'm kind of turned off, but I'd heard so much about this that I was like, well, let me give it a try. The Tattooist of Auschwitz by Heather Morris. This was about the gentleman who was the tatuiera of Auschwitz. So basically he did the tattooing of the numbers on the arms of the people that were sent to Auschwitz. And this was super interesting. It is a love story in some parts, and it is amazing to see how love can overcome such horrific circumstances. But it's also about the different people in the camp and what they're going through and how they protect each other and survive. My Sweet Girl by Amanda Jayatissa. This was also a really good thriller. I fell in love with this because of the cover. The cover was just so beautiful and mysterious, and I'd seen a couple things about it on social media. I picked it up, and the summary sounded catchy too, so I gave it a chance. And it is about a girl from Sri Lanka. She gets adopted by an American family, lives her life in San Francisco, and then as an adult, there's some stuff that comes back from her past to haunt her. It's told in dual timelines, one past, one present. Lots of information about Sri Lanka and Sri Lankan culture. Found that super, super interesting. And next up, The Bone Season by Samantha Shannon. This was probably my favorite start to a series this year. I'm really looking forward to reading the next couple books in the year coming. This is like a mix between sci-fi, fantasy, dystopian, political. It's a lot of things, but it was really interesting. There's basically this dystopian society. There's people that exist that have different powers, and they're viewed as like a danger to regular society. So they're rounded up and put in these camps, and then you find out the real reason that these camps exist, and really the whole story goes from there. Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. Kazuo Ishiguro is probably one of my favorite authors. I love Never Let Me Go. It's one of my all-time favorite books, especially in the dystopian category. And I was really looking forward to Clara and the Sun once I bought it. I thought it was pretty good. I don't think it was his best writing ever, but I don't think it's his worst either. It's definitely worth a read. It features artificial friend, or AI, named Clara, who gets adopted into a family. Her job is to keep their daughter company. It's one of those things where you get classic Ishiguro writing. He lulls you into this false sense of security and then switches tack with you. And slowly you start to see all these little things that are incongruous with what you've been presented. Super good book. I read The Thief by Megan Whalen Turner, which is also the start of a series. I was recommended this by someone at my local bookstore. They said it's one of their favorite series. This was a super fun book. It It was twisty, lots of adventure, kind of puzzling. I really liked it. I think it was a fun read. I don't know if it was like the most surprising. I kind of figured out where it was going, but I still liked it nonetheless. The Way of All Flesh. This is also the start of a series. I did not know that when I picked it up. I was recommended this book at a bookshop in San Diego, told that it was like a fiction, mystery, and then a whole bunch of like medical information. It deals a lot with medical invention. So that's pretty much what it is. It follows a character named Raven, and he is graduating med school. He goes to be an apprentice to a very famous gynecological surgeon, and they're basically inventing chloroform as a sedative for women that are going through complex procedures. Meanwhile, there's some mysterious murders, and he kind of gets tied up in the investigation of that. It's super interesting, really good. Does include some gruesome medical scenes. So if you're not into like bloody description, maybe skip that one. And then Emma in the Night. This is a mystery, sort of a suspense thriller as well. It's about sisters. One sister goes missing. The other one's kind of trying to unwind the story of what happened to her. Very complex, very interesting. I liked that a lot. Caraval was also a series that I started. I just read Caraval a few weeks back by Stephanie Garber. I liked it a lot. Very magical. A little bit of mystery mixed in with the fantasy. I loved the characters. I loved the description. I honestly wanted a little more than it gave me at some points, but overall I'm pretty happy with it. I'm looking forward to reading the next couple books in the series. And Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney. I finished that this morning. This was also a suspense thriller mystery kind of a deal. I've been hearing so much about this. This is all over Bookstagram, I guess because Book of the Month featured it a while back, so it's been popping up a lot. And I've been hearing really good things, so I thought I'd give it a try. I really liked this. It was very twisty. I loved the setting in the Scottish Highlands. I've been to the Scottish Highlands myself, so I love anytime when a book is taking place in a place that I've visited. I could really, really imagine the description and everything, or the places that they were describing and everything. And it follows a couple. They're having marital problems, and they go on a vacation to the Scottish Highlands together to this very remote little town, and things start to go wrong. Very, very twisty. A lot of unpredictable twists. I did get some twists here and there, but I didn't get all of them, and I really enjoyed it for that. And finally, my 5-star reviews. I had 10 5 stars this year. And like I said, again, remember that this is mostly from October to December. So if you're thinking like 10 in a whole year, it's not really a whole year, it's about 3 months. So 5-star reviews. First up was Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. I just finished this like a week ago. It is the start of the Between Earth and Sky series. Fevered Star, the second book in the series, is coming out in May 2022. This book was so good. The world building is so complex and rich. It features several different indigenous cultures. It's a pre-Columbian indigenous society, and it includes spiritual beliefs and all sorts of different stuff. It kind of centers on some religious conflict. There's a couple different players from a couple different groups that are moving pieces. The only thing I can really compare it to would be like Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings in terms of scale and epicness. The world building is there on that same level. The amount of characters that are introduced kind of reminds me of Game of Thrones, where initially you're like, whoa, there's so many people to keep track of. And then as the story progresses a little bit, kind of narrows down into the ones that are going to be the main characters and the ones that are going to be like the secondary important characters. I am so excited to get to the second book. Like, I cannot wait. I wish it was coming out tomorrow. Next was Push by Sapphire. I've been putting this book off for a really long time. I knew that it was going to be a really depressing read. I haven't seen the movie, but I have heard about it, and I just wanted to wait till I was kind of in the right place for it because I knew it was going to be difficult. It was very difficult. It is a really, really sad book, and there's a lot of really crappy things that happen to this poor girl in it. Definitely heavy trigger warnings for sexual abuse, violence. Just, I don't know. I mean, like, every trigger warning you can think of is probably relevant to this story. It's really sad, and I wish that it had not been as sad as it was, but I don't know if it would have been quite as moving if it hadn't been. So that's a good 5-star review. And then The House on the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune, one of my favorite books this year. It was so light and fluffy and magical. kind of gave me the same vibes that I had the first time I read a Harry Potter book. Just that warm, like, oh my gosh, I'm experiencing the magical world for the first time feel. And it had a really sweet romance, great representation. Really liked that one as well. Next up was Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner. This was probably the most beautiful memoir I think I've read. It was so poignant. It expressed grief so beautifully. And I can't really put into words how well written it is. It really mixes like cultural notes and like connects food with memories, which for me is so important. I'm a chef, and so I do that a lot as well. I connect food with memories, and just everything she was expressing, I really related. Even though we're from different cultures, it's like I could still read and understand her grief and the way that she was expressing it was just so beautiful. And Circe by Madeline Miller, excellent book. I always thought I wasn't that into mythology just because most of the time I remember it from school and I kind of remember it being taught in a very dry way. But someone told me that Circe was incredible, and I'm so glad that they did because it was incredible. It was fantastic the way that it was retold. I loved seeing the story through her eyes, and I don't know, I can't rave about it enough. I have the Song of Achilles. I haven't read it yet, but I'm hoping that's also going to end up being 5 stars. And then Educated. This was also a fantastic memoir. You want to talk about a dysfunctional family. Man, Tara Westover's family is so dysfunctional, and the things that she goes through are insane, but it's ultimately a testament of human resilience, of how this woman overcame all the shit she went through as a child to become highly educated, to teach herself to read. It's just a phenomenal, motivating book, and every time that I feel like I can't accomplish something, now I can look back at that book and be like, wow, if this woman can make it through that, I'm like, have no reason not to go do the thing I need to do. Born a Crime by Trevor Noah. This actually might be my favorite book of the whole year and one of my favorite memoirs of all time, or autobiographies. I'm not sure which one. I guess autobiography. It is so good, and it's one of these rare occasions where I actually prefer the audiobook to the actual book. The reason is because Trevor Noah narrates it himself. It's about his life growing up in apartheid Africa, his relationship with his mother, his grandmother, his father, talks about, struggling with his racial identity in an area where he was considered a crime. Black people and white people were not supposed to mix at that time, and so him being a product of a biracial marriage was illegal, and his mother could have actually been arrested for it. So there's all sorts of interesting things. One of the things that makes the audiobook so special, though, is that because Trevor Noah is narrating it himself, he's able to include the accents and dialects of the people. So when he's talking about, his grandmother speaking Xhosa, he can do all the clicks and the pronunciations properly. Or he talks about some guys speaking Zulu and he can imitate the accent well. And then, he does his father's accent. It's a fascinating book. And I laughed, even though it's like very, very deep in terms of topic. I laughed so much because Trevor Noah is just so funny. He includes so much humor even in dark places. If you haven't read it, it's a must read. Absolute must read. And then next up was The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. I read this like right around Thanksgiving time. I think that this was probably the most thought-provoking book that I read this year. I was mulling it over for like days after I read it. I felt like initially after finishing it angry with one of the characters, and then realized that my anger is coming from my perspective, but I'm not looking at it from the perspective of the people in the story, and like as a white person, my privilege might be blinding me to what the character was experiencing. And so it really made me think deeply about racial perception and the choices that people make based on, the race that they are, the time that they're growing up in, the prejudices that they experience. It was like a really thought-provoking book, and it was so well written, so interesting. Highly recommend it. Next was Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine. This was another book that was very thought-provoking. Initially, I thought I wasn't going to like it at all. I was actually worried I was going to DNF it. Eleanor was so gratingly hard to read initially, But by the end, I was like completely in love with her character. It at first, it just seemed like she was just a very pessimistic person, but then I kind of came to realize throughout the story that I think that she might have had like autism or something like that, and you kind of start to see that she's like neurodivergent in some way, and you come to understand that she's been through trauma, and there's all these things that create the character that she is, and as you come to understand her, the book becomes just so deep and meaningful. It's a really sweet and interesting book. Definitely recommend. And finally, Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell. This was my first book by Lisa Jewell, and it was a doozy. It's about a family where they, like, one of their daughters goes missing, and they never get any resolution. It's like 10 years later, they still don't know what happened to her. They've never found a body. Police think she just ran away. And mom and dad have gotten divorced. Mom is starting to move on, date someone, and the whole mystery of her daughter going missing gets dragged back up. And the ending of this book, holy shit, it was like a gut punch. I did not expect it to end the way that it did. It was very, very disconcerting and icky and surprising. It was probably the only thriller that I read this year where I did not guess the ending. I had a vague idea of who might have been involved, but not where it was going overall. And it's hard for me to not figure out thrillers, so I was pretty impressed with that. So now that we've gone through all of the books and all of the ratings, let's go over a couple statistics. In total, I read 20,234 pages between October and December mostly. My average book length was 337 pages. Most of my books were like in the 300-ish zone. That seems to be the sweet spot. I did have a handful of books that were shorter and a handful of books that were longer. The longest book that I read in this period of time was Billy Summers by Stephen King. It came in at 515 pages. And the shortest book was Nothing But Blackened Teeth, which came in at 128 pages. So it was interesting. It was a lot of genres. Definitely covered fantasy, horror, thriller, suspense, romance, just a tiny, tiny bit of romance, memoirs, autobiographies, a lot of historical fiction, not any sci-fi, definitely a couple self-help in there, and contemporary fiction, of course. Good mix of things, really. I'm pretty pleased with my spread of genres. I will say that most of these genres are pretty typical for me. I would say the area that I did the most work to push outside of my comfort zone would have been in the horror genre. In October, I focused my whole TBR on just reading horror books. And prior to this October, I hadn't really read a lot of horror. Psychological thrillers and suspense, yes, but like gothic horror, things like that, not so much. So I did do a good amount of expanding my horizons in terms of that genre. And I think that's about all the statistics that I have to provide for 2021. Went over all the books that we've read, the genres, the pages, all of that. So I think next we're going to go ahead and get into my goals moving forward into 2022. So it's New Year's Eve. 2022 is literally tomorrow morning. Wait to start a new year. I don't know if you're like me, 2021 seems like it's been a big transitional year for me. I worked in an industry that I had never worked in before. I've been a chef my entire life, and because of the pandemic, things were really weird with restaurants and catering here where I'm at. So I transitioned into elder care. I was working in a medical office, scheduling elder care workers and working on authorizations for clients and things. It was a tough job for me, very emotionally demanding. I was doing translation work in my secondary language, which I have no formal education in, so there was a huge learning curve even there. And I had on-call shifts, so I would do on-call for a week at a time, every other week. And it was very draining and exhausting. I was working 5 days a week there, plus a week, Saturdays at my friend's catering / meal prep company. So 6 days a week, plus on-call every other week. And it was exhausting, but it was a lot of learning, a lot of new skills, a whole different period of my life. I moved to a new apartment with my partner, did a lot of things, hiked, did some beautiful mountains, had some great adventures, but really focused my adventures around home. In the past, my adventures have been going to other countries and traveling more, but because of the pandemic, I've been kind of focused on exploring like the immediate area around me, the couple states around me and everything. So I got to see some really cool places, do some really cool things, climbed some mountains that I have been wanting to climb for a long time, and started this social media account. So, like I said, it was kind of a transitional thing, and going into 2022, I have some exciting things going on. So I'm going to go over my goals going into 2022, both personal and book related. So on the personal front, starting in January, I start a new job. I decided that while I learned a lot from the elder care company that I was working with, I was ready for a job that was less involved. The on-call was cutting into my free time to do things, and working 6 days a week was just not really maintainable for the long run. So my friend who I'd been working for on Saturdays needed somebody to come and run his meal prep company. So he hired me on full time. I'm so excited. This is somebody that I have known for many, many years, really, really respect. And I'm really excited to go work with him full time. I will be working 4 days a week, which leaves me 3 days a week to take care of the house, get social media stuff done. Really gives me much more of a work-life balance. So I'm very much looking forward to that. And I'm going to be working on getting back into like a healthier rhythm with life. Because I was working 6 days a week plus all the on-call and everything, I didn't have a lot of time left over for myself. So my normal routine of waking up and meditating and doing yoga and then getting to the gym kind of fell off, and my healthy eating fell off a little bit as well. So I'm going to be working on getting back into better shape, hiking more. I love to hike, and with the on-call shifts, I couldn't go out into hiking as much as I like because I had to be within cell phone range in case of emergencies. So I'm looking forward to getting back to hiking. I actually went out a couple days ago while it was snowing here in Las Vegas and hiked in the snow with a friend, which was a well-needed reprieve. So I'm going to get out and hike more. I'm going to get back into my routine of meditating and doing yoga every morning, and I'm going to definitely make sure I'm getting to the gym at least 3 times a week. So those are kind of my personal goals. I think on the book front or the social media front, I have 2 social media goals specifically. One is to get to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube by the end of 2022. I think that is a reasonable pace. I mean, fingers crossed, maybe it'll go faster than that, but ultimately I'll be super stoked if I make it to 1,000 by the end of 2022. And on Instagram, I would like to get to 10,000 subscribers by the end of 2022. I'm just creeping up on 2,000 right now, so I think that that's possible, maybe slightly ambitious, but we'll see. And in terms of reading specifically, I am making it a goal to complete my TBR each month. I was terrible at completing my TBR last year. Well, I guess technically still this year. I was terrible at completing my TBRs. I would pick out books, put in thought into what theme I was going to do for the month, and then I'd read 1 or 2 books, and then my mind would just be racing to read other things. So this year in 2022, I'm really going to focus on completing my TBRs. I'm also doing a little bit of a challenge to kind of broaden my horizons and try some different books that I might not have picked out normally. And there's this challenge going around on Instagram right now. It's been kind of going on the last couple days, where you let people from Instagram pick 12 books for you. So, people are just giving you your suggestions, and then you create 12 books and you're supposed to read 1 each month. So I actually upped the ante, and I'm going to do 2 books per month. I'm actually going to be doing a video on this. Eventually I'll add a link in here somewhere once I've posted that video. And it'll be 24 books picked out by my Instagram friends, and I'll be doing 2 per month. And I have one really big challenge that I'm super excited about. This challenge is so big that it actually might take me from 2022 all the way into 2023. It's just going to depend on how fast I can find the books that I need for it and how fast I can read them. So a little bit of background on this challenge that I'm creating, and that you're welcome to join in if you're feeling ambitious. I try really hard to read diverse books. I like to read books from every single continent of the world. I try really hard to read books from people of different ethnicities, different nationalities, different races, different sexual orientations, different gender identities, different age groups, people that are disabled, etc. And in that, like looking at the books that I read this year and assessing it, I think I did pretty good mixing in, you know, a lot of different diverse backgrounds in my stories. But I noticed that with each continent, there seems to be specific countries that are like more frequently published. So for example, in Africa, the books that I'm seeing representing Africa a lot come from Nigeria for the most part, at least the ones that are available in my area. Or in terms of books from Europe, I'm seeing lots of ones like from Germany, Austria, Italy. A lot of like historical fiction gets set in that area. And I love it. I mean, I'm not mad at that at all, but I started wondering, like, why am I not seeing books from other countries? Like, how come I haven't found a book from Zimbabwe or a book from Belgium or a book from Uruguay? So what I'm going to do is I am actually going to challenge myself to read one book from every single country in the world. The list of countries that I'm going to be using recognizes 192 countries, and I've been to 25 so far, so I'm excited to read books from countries that I've visited, but I'm actually even more excited to read books from countries that I have not yet visited, because it kind of allows me some insight into the country, the culture, the history, etc. So throughout this year, I am going to be reading books from different countries. I'm going to make an effort, like I said, to read one from every single country. I anticipate that I might be able to finish half of this challenge in 2022 and then the second half of this challenge in 2023. Some countries, obviously, it's going to be harder to find books, like small countries like Timor-Leste and Vanuatu. I have already done some research, and in those cases, if I can't find a book written by an author from that country or a book set in that country, then I might opt for like a book about that country. So we'll see what I come up with. I actually already have my books for January picked out. I'm very, very excited about the different books that I'm going to be reading for this challenge in January. Those won't be the only books that I focus on. It'll probably be like 3 to 4 books per month that are going to be focused on these country challenges. Maybe a little more than that, maybe 6 a month, something like that. But yeah, so complete my TBRs, read the 24 books that my Instagram friends picked out, and Around the World Book Challenge. And if you'd like to join the Around the World Book Challenge with me, let me know in the comments. I would love to have more than one person join in with me. It'd be great to see this become a thing. I really, really encourage people to learn about the world, learn about different countries, different cultures, because, it's important for us to know these things. And reading is such a good introduction into different cultures. So if you want to join, let me know in the comments. Finally, at the end of the video, we're gonna go ahead and announce some giveaway results. Prior to Christmas, I did a couple giveaways on a couple of videos. I was intending to do a live stream on Christmas Day, but I've been slacking off. So I'm really sorry that these are a bit late, but I do think it's super important to follow through when we say we're gonna do giveaways. So here are my official results. The first giveaway was for a Amazon book or book depository book, like from your wish list, of a $20 value. And I got a couple of really nice comments on it, and my winner for this particular challenge is Molly Aladdin. So Molly, if you can go ahead and get in touch with me, my email is in my description of my video. Send me an email and let's coordinate so I can get you your book off of your wish list. And then in my second giveaway, I'm giving away an item from my friend Anna, the Sustainable Reader on Instagram. She has an Etsy account and it's all book related items. She has some really cool book boxes. So I am gonna reward you with one book box from her Etsy account. They come with some cool products and everything. And the winner of that giveaway is Elizabeth Tugi. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that last name right. Elizabeth, same thing. Please email me. My email is in the description. Let's coordinate so I can get you your present shipped out as well. Thank you to everybody that entered the challenges or the giveaways. I really appreciate the feedback and, getting to know people and what books they're reading, what they wanted to see under the Christmas tree and everything. I'm sorry that the results are a little bit delayed, but I hope each of you is happy to have won. I'll be looking forward to speaking with you both soon. And with that said, this has been Bandy's Books. I'm Caitlin. If you like this video, thumbs up, comment below if you agreed with my ratings throughout the year. Let me know how many books you read this year. maybe what some of your goals are going into 2022. I'd love to know if you have any book related resolutions. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please subscribe. I've got some cool things coming up in 2022, and I'd love to see you around. Bye.